We've always believed we were Earth's first great civilization. But what if we're not the beginning, just the latest chapter? New clues buried deep in rock and ice suggest someone may have come before us and quietly left. No ruins, no bones, just traces no one can explain. What if Earth's first civilization never vanished, but simply outgrew this world and moved on? Beneath our feet, deeper than the roots of the oldest trees, older than bones, older than the air we breathe, something waits. The ground does not speak, but it remembers. It remembers every footstep, every storm, every fire, every breath that was ever taken. And maybe, just maybe, it remembers someone before us. Not dinosaurs, not mammoths, not the people in caves with fire and stone tools. Someone else. Someone like us, but not us. Someone who didn't leave behind broken spears or painted rocks. Someone who left almost nothing. Almost. The air above is loud with machines and lights. Planes cross the sky. Satellites blink far overhead. Cities hum like beehives. Cars, phones, wires, screens. These are the marks we leave. But deep time does not care about noise. It swallows it. The earth moves slow, like a great sleeping animal. It grinds mountains into dust. It covers everything. Bones break. Wood rots. Metal rusts. Concrete cracks. 1,000,000 years from now, most of what we've made will be gone. But some things stay. And if we can find those things, we can ask a hard question. Were we really first? For a long time, people didn't ask that. They believed the story was simple. Earth formed, then life came, then animals, then people, then us. We are the builders, the thinkers, the ones with machines and ideas. Before us, they said, there was only nature, but nature is tricky. It doesn't always show us the truth right away. Sometimes it hides it, tucks it away behind stone and silence. Sometimes what we think is natural isn't. There was a scientist once who looked at a rock in Italy, just a piece of stone, a layer of clay no thicker than a pencil, but inside it was something strange, a metal called iridium found in space, not in Earth's crust. The clay was old, 66 million years. That layer was a grave. The dinosaurs died then, and that metal told the tale. It came from an asteroid, a big one, a killer. But what that rock also showed was something else. It showed that even after all that time, one single day, a day of fire and skyfall, could still be seen in the stone. So now, we ask, if an asteroid can leave a mark, can a civilization, can cities and power plants and machines leave fingerprints in the dirt even after millions of years? We know what we're leaving behind. Plastic, glass, metals that don't break down, carbon in the air, strange chemicals in the water, even nuclear waste that will glow in the dark for hundreds of thousands of years. These are called technosignatures, clues that we were here. So, if someone else came before us, they would have left signs too. But have we looked hard enough? The Earth is old. Very old. 4.5 billion years. Human civilization? 10,000 years maybe. That's like a blink in 1,000 lifetimes. So much could have happened before us. Whole stories. Whole worlds. And all it would take is time. Enough time to cover every trace. Volcanoes, earthquakes, floods, ice ages, and silence. Lots of silence. Not the kind you hear with your ears, the kind that lives in stone. The idea is called the Silurian hypothesis. It's not from science fiction, though it sounds like it. Real scientists made it. They asked a serious question. If there was a high-tech civilization on Earth millions of years ago, how would we know? What would they leave behind? Not buildings. Those fall. Not machines. Those rust. But chemicals? Maybe. Isotopes? Maybe. Odd patterns in rock layers? Maybe. Maybe we've seen them already and called them something else. There's one more thought. One that changes everything. What if that first civilization didn't die? What if they saw the end coming and chose to leave? to not wait for the sky to fall or the oceans to rise? What if they had the means to go, to rise above, beyond, and vanish? Not a fall, but a step forward, a quiet goodbye. What would they leave behind then? Not ruins, not warnings, just echoes, gentle ones. A line of carbon here, a strange metal sphere there, a thin layer in ice. Something so small we might miss it unless we know where to look, unless we ask the right question. The stars above us burn with secrets. They shine on all things, old and new, past and present. We look up and wonder if someone is out there. But maybe someone once looked back at Earth and wondered the same. Maybe they once called this planet home. Maybe they stood where we stand now. And maybe, just maybe, they left. So we dig, we search, we listen, and deep below the dirt, behind walls of time and shadow, we begin to hear a faint voice. Not words, not sounds, but something else. A pattern, a puzzle, a presence, waiting, watching. The earth holds its breath, and so do we. The rain was soft that morning, falling in little taps against stone. In the forest, the trees whispered, shaking off water like sleepy animals. Beneath the soil, worms curled through cool tunnels. Seeds slept, roots reached. And far below all of that, deeper than any farmer's plow could ever go, deeper than even the deepest mines, the rocks held their secrets in silence. One of those secrets was this: Earth had not always been quiet. Long ago, something had stirred. Not storms, not quakes, something else. Something thinking, something building. But no bones, no tools, no cities remained. Just faint scars in stone, like old footprints worn smooth by time. For hundreds of years, people believed the story of Earth was written in a straight line. First, the Earth formed. Then, after a long wait, single cells appeared. Then plants, then animals, then us. The end. That was the timeline in every school book. But that timeline is missing something. It forgets how long Earth has been around. 4.5 billion years is hard to picture. If Earth's history was a big book, then humans would only appear in the last word of the last sentence of the last page. That means there are pages and pages we never read. Whole chapters lost, or never even noticed. What if one of those chapters told the story of someone else? Imagine this: a civilization rising before the dinosaurs. Not just living, but thinking, building, exploring. They may have had science. They may have had language. They may have understood the stars. They may have even looked up and said, "What else is out there?" But time is a hungry thing. It eats mountains, swallows oceans, crushes bones into powder. If that civilization didn't leave giant stone statues or thick metal towers, time would have eaten it whole. Unless they left something deeper, something even time couldn't touch. We know what happens when humans touch the world. We burn fuel. We change the air. We send chemicals into water. We build with plastic and metal. Even if we disappear tomorrow, those marks will stay. They will show up in the rock layers, in the ice, in the soil. Geologists call these signs technosignatures. They are clues of machines, of energy use, of life that builds and changes. So the question becomes, do we see signs like that from long ago? Signs that came before us? Some layers in Earth's crust look strange. They hold odd metals, funny spikes in carbon, layers of ash. Sometimes the levels of certain elements don't make sense. A sudden rise in nickel, or a drop in carbon that lasts only a few thousand years. That's fast in geologic time. Too fast to be from nature, some say. Volcanoes and meteors can do strange things, yes. But they leave their own patterns. Wide, messy, scattered. These layers are sharp, clean, like lines drawn with purpose. Could someone have drawn them? In Antarctica, ice holds air from long ago, trapped bubbles, frozen time. Scientists drill deep, pulling out long tubes of ice called cores. They look like crystal logs. Each layer tells a story. The ice remembers warm years, cold years, fires, volcanoes. But some layers are odd. They show gas levels rising fast, then dropping, then rising again. And this happened not once, but several times over hundreds of thousands of years. Like something large was burning fuel, then stopped, then started again. But how? Who? The ocean floor is even older than the ice. Beneath the sea, mud and dust settle for millions of years. Tiny shells, tiny bones, pieces of rock. Everything falls and gets buried. And sometimes, inside those layers, scientists find strange shapes, little balls of metal, spheres of titanium or nickel, very tiny but very round. Some come from space, but others look like they were made in high heat, made on purpose. That's what's strange. They sit in layers older than humans, much older. So what made them? Some scientists shrug. They say nature is messy. It surprises us. Maybe the patterns are just accidents. Maybe the metals come from volcanoes or strange ocean vents. But others pause. They stare at the patterns and feel a chill, because nature repeats. But it doesn't repeat like this. These patterns feel timed, controlled, as if someone was turning a dial. Not a volcano, not a meteor, a mind. One deep core from the Pacific Ocean showed something strange. A layer full of rare elements, ones used today in electronics. But this layer was from 50 million years ago, before humans, before whales, before grass. The elements were spread evenly, not like from a volcano or asteroid, as if they had been scattered from the air, like pollution, like a city, burning. And still, there were no tools, no bones, no writing, no carvings, just chemistry. Just the earth whispering, "Look closer." If they were here, they didn't stay. There is no city hiding in the jungle, no towers buried in sand. The signs are subtle, soft, like fingerprints on glass, easy to miss. But if they left, where did they go? Did they die in fire? Did they drown in rising seas? Or did they choose to leave? Did they climb into ships and rise into the sky, leaving Earth behind like a child outgrowing home? That idea is harder. It means they planned. It means they didn't fall, they flew. That would explain the silence, the missing bones, the missing mess. If you leave on purpose, you clean up. You take what matters. You leave only shadows. But why would they go? Maybe the planet was changing. Maybe they knew what was coming. A great fire, an ice age, an impact. Or maybe they didn't wait for disaster. Maybe they just reached a point when staying wasn't enough, when the stars seemed closer than the sea. Maybe they learned how to leave safely, gently, and forever. And if they did, they might be out there still, watching, waiting, or forgetting. The Earth is old. We are young, and we are only just learning to listen. What else is out there, buried in stone, sleeping in ice, floating in space? Maybe the better question is, who came first? The wind moved slow across the desert, picking up dust and tiny bits of stone, brushing them into ripples like waves on water. In the heat, the air shimmered. Far away, a mountain stood quiet, its shadows stretched long across the sand. Nothing moved. No sound came. But deep below the surface, inside layers of rock piled over millions of years, something unusual slept. Not bones, not fossils, just lines. Thin, sharp, and strange. Lines of black carbon, packed so tight they looked like ink spilled across stone. Not wide like a volcano's mark, not scattered like a forest fire. Narrow, focused, controlled. Someone, or something, had burned a lot of fuel here. But the weirdest thing, it happened 55 million years ago. Scientists call this event the Paleocene-Eocene Thermal Maximum, or PETM. It was a time when Earth's temperature jumped fast. The oceans got warmer. The sky held more carbon. Plants grew in the wrong places. Rain fell where deserts used to be. And it didn't take a million years. It happened fast. In about 20,000 years, carbon levels soared. That may sound long to us, but in Earth's history, it's just a blink. What caused it? The usual answers are volcanoes, or methane gas escaping from under the sea. But something about the pattern felt off. Too fast, too sharp, too much like us. The carbon in those rocks had a certain shape. Scientists call it an isotope signature. It's like a fingerprint for where the carbon came from. One kind means it came from plants. Another means it came from deep underground, like oil or coal. And the PETM carbon? It matched the kind we dig up and burn today. Fossil fuels. But there were no people back then. No cars. No factories. Just animals with tiny hooves and forests full of palm trees. So who, or what, burned all that carbon? Some say it must have been nature. A chain of volcanoes maybe, or giant burps of gas from the sea floor. But even then, something doesn't sit right. The speed. The amount. The way the warming spread evenly around the world. These are things we see now with human pollution. The PETM left the same fingerprints. Only long, long ago. And then there's the silence after. For about 200,000 years, Earth stayed hot. Then, slowly, the planet cooled. Carbon levels fell. Temperatures dropped. The strange black lines in the rock ended. No more signs of burning. No more strange fingerprints. Just quiet. It was as if something burned everything it could, and then stopped. Other layers tell similar stories. At the end of the Permian period, 252 million years ago, Earth almost died. Scientists call it the Great Dying. 96% of ocean life vanished. 70% of land animals disappeared. Forests fell. Coral reefs crumbled. The rocks from that time show more black lines, more sudden carbon, another fingerprint. It matches the one from the PETM, and it matches us. That's 3 carbon spikes. Ours. The PET. The Great Dying. All sharp. All sudden. All pointing to something. Or someone. Burning a massive amount of ancient carbon in a short time. Not spread out over millions of years, like a lazy fire. Fast. Hot. Devastating. And each time, Earth needed hundreds of thousands of years to recover. But what made the fire? What hand lit the match? One layer from China shows something stranger. Inside a slice of rock from the Triassic period, scientists found tiny metal balls. They were round, smooth, and made of rare metals like titanium and niobium. These aren't easy to make. Today, we use heat over 1,600 degrees Celsius to form them in furnaces. They are a waste product from factories, power plants, and even nuclear explosions. But these spheres were found in rocks over 200 million years old. No humans, no machines, no cities. So how did they get there? Some tried to explain them with volcanoes. Lava can melt rock and sometimes toss little blobs into the air. But the patterns were wrong. The spheres were too even, too perfect, and they were found in thin layers spread across wide areas, like something had exploded in the sky and rained them down. Not a mountain blast. Something higher, something wider, a pattern more like what we see today after nuclear tests. But nuclear tests leave more than metal spheres. They leave isotopes, elements that don't belong in nature. Cesium, plutonium, strontium. These don't last forever, but some stay for thousands of years. So scientists began to search for strange isotopes in ancient rock. Most times they found nothing. But a few samples from deep ocean cores and old uranium deposits told a different story. In Gabon, Africa, a mine called Oklo holds uranium ore. But part of that ore is missing something important. Uranium-235, that's the kind used in nuclear power and bombs. In 1972, scientists studying the rocks found the same byproduct left behind in reactors, but these rocks were 2 billion years old. They called it a natural reactor. They said the conditions were perfect for a chain reaction to happen on its own. And maybe they were. But what if they weren't? What if someone long ago learned how to make power from atoms? What if they used it and left nothing but ashes and silence? No one can say for sure. These clues are not proof, but they are patterns. Patterns that match what we do. Carbon spikes, metal spheres, isotope trails. They don't shout, they whisper. They say, "Look closer." We dig deeper. Ice cores from Greenland show odd gases in thin lines, spikes of methane and carbon dioxide, rising fast, then falling. Not every spike lines up with volcanoes. Some look like industry. But the dates? They're all ancient. 800,000 years ago, 400,000, 120,000, before cities, before writing. Still, the signs are there. And maybe the strangest thought of all is this. What if the signs we find are the ones that were meant to be found? What if someone didn't leave buildings or bones because they didn't want to? What if they left only what would survive time? The rocks, the ice, the sky. If you were trying to vanish without a trace, what would you leave behind? And what would you take with you? Earth forgets many things, but it never forgets the fire. The fire always stays, even after the hands that made it are long gone. The ocean was still, not flat, not calm, but still, like something waiting. A low fog clung to the surface, and the sun above it glowed pale and distant, like a memory trying to shine through time. Somewhere far beneath the waves, in the cold dark that sunlight never touched, tiny bits of dust drifted down. Bit by bit, year after year, they settled on the seafloor. Some came from the wind, some from rivers, some from space. But not all of it was natural. Hidden in the layers of that ocean mud were tiny pieces of something strange, shaped by heat, shaped by design, not by waves or wind. Something made by hands, or something like hands, a long, long time ago. Scientists sent drills deep into the sea. They brought up long tubes of mud, each layer older than the one above it, like pages in a book written in silence. At first, the layers seemed plain, mud, shells, sand, but under the microscope, something else appeared, little spheres, shiny ones, made of metal. Some were only a few microns across, smaller than a grain of pollen, but their shapes were too perfect. Smooth, round, balanced. Nature doesn't usually make things like that, especially from rare metals like titanium, molybdenum, or vanadium. We know these shapes today. They come from blast furnaces, welding arcs, and superheated engines. In our time, these metal spheres fall from smokestacks and jets. They float in the air, land on rooftops, or end up in lakes and oceans. They are born in fire, not nature. But these old spheres weren't from today. They were buried under meters of ancient silt, dated to tens of millions of years ago, before humans, before apes, before most mammals even existed. How did they get there? Some scientists said maybe volcanoes made them. Lava can throw molten rock into the sky, and sometimes it cools in midair. But the mix of metals was wrong. Too pure, too exact. Volcanoes don't filter elements. These looked like they came from something with precision, something with control, not chaos. Then more clues came. In deep-sea cores from the Indian Ocean, scientists found odd concentrations of rare earth elements, things we use in electronics, batteries, lasers. These metals aren't common. They don't just appear on their own. They have to be dug up, crushed, melted, and purified. Yet here they were, frozen in the mud from 60 million years ago. And once again, they weren't scattered by chance. They were laid out in a pattern, thin, wide, and strangely even. As if they had been carried through the air and settled across the sea, just like pollution does now. Closer to shorelines, the cores showed a different kind of mystery. Traces of synthetic compounds, chemicals with bonds too strong for nature to build. Some resembled modern plastics. Others had no match at all. They weren't made by bacteria, or trees, or volcanoes. Their shapes were stable. Their bonds were tight, and their presence made no sense. They should not have been there, but they were. and they were old. Layers above them had already turned to stone. In labs, these compounds resisted heat. They resisted acids. Even when burned, they left behind unusual residues. One compound broke apart only at 800 degrees Celsius. Another didn't melt at all. Modern engineers looked at the molecules and blinked. They seemed overbuilt, too stable, like someone wanted them to last forever. If someone had made these materials long ago, they had understood chemistry deeply, not just how to create, but how to endure. Maybe they wanted these compounds to be found, or maybe they simply didn't expect anyone would come after them at all. Even stranger were the ice cores from Antarctica. In those deep layers, from over 700,000 years ago, scientists found tiny fibers. Not from plants, not from animals. Long and thin, some curved, some straight, some hollow. Under powerful microscopes, they showed a pattern. Tight weaves, like threads spun by machines. They didn't match anything natural. They looked almost like fibers from modern composite materials. But they were buried in ice older than any known civilization. How did they get there? The air in those ice cores held no ash from known volcanoes, no signs of big fires or storms. Just quiet snow, falling gently year after year, locking away these strange threads like secrets no one had asked about. And then came the questions. Too many, too fast. Were these fibers from nature after all? Could bacteria make them? Could minerals grow them? So far, no one could show how. And so the questions stayed, growing louder in silence. If someone had made these things, these metals, these compounds, these fibers, where did they go? Did they vanish in war? In floods? Did they live underwater or underground or in places we haven't looked? Or did they leave? Rising into the sky, into space, into the dark, where time doesn't pass the same. What would it take to leave no cities behind? No books, no bones, just dust, just clues, just a puzzle of metal and plastic and ash. A puzzle waiting in rocks and mud, asking a single question with no words. Did someone come before? Maybe their buildings fell. Maybe they melted. Or maybe they were never built to stay. Maybe they lived in things we'd never think to look for. In clouds of machines the size of dust. In networks hidden inside stone. In forms of life that don't need bones at all. What if they made the choice to vanish? Not from fear, not from failure, but from knowledge. What if they learned that Earth changes and nothing stays forever? Not ice, not forests, not empires. What if they let go before the wave came? The ocean holds its breath. So does the stone, so does the ice. Waiting, watching, holding pieces of a story we barely understand. And every day we dig, we drill, we sample, and find one more piece, one more puzzle. What kind of world leaves behind no statue, no grave, no name, but fills the deepest mud with perfect metal spheres, strange fibers, and plastics that should not exist? What kind of civilization chooses to leave quietly? And why did they go? The sky above the desert turned gold as the sun dipped low, casting long shadows that reached like fingers across the dry land. A soft wind lifted dust from the earth, sending it spinning in slow circles. The rocks here were red, brown, and gray, layered like a cake left too long in an oven. From far away, the hills looked quiet, lifeless, ancient. But inside one of those hills, a team of scientists chipped away at stone, brushing and scraping with steady hands. They weren't looking for bones. They were looking for something older, something stranger. Not animals, not people, just patterns. And they had found one. It was thin, no thicker than a book's cover, buried under hundreds of meters of earth. It looked like a dark stripe in the stone, almost black, smooth to the touch and rich with carbon. But it wasn't charcoal from a forest fire. It wasn't ash from a volcano. The carbon was too concentrated, too clean, like the kind that comes from burning oil or gas. The layer dated back 93 million years, long before humans, long before flowers. The Earth back then was hot and steamy, but something about this layer felt unnatural. The scientists called it an event horizon, a moment when something massive changed the planet's systems all at once. There were other places on Earth where this same dark layer appeared, deep in the cliffs of Colorado, beneath the seafloor near Africa, even in the frozen ground of the Arctic. All the same time, all the same strange fingerprint. Something had burned, a lot, and fast. They studied the gases trapped in the layer. There was a sharp jump in carbon dioxide, a strange drop in oxygen. Temperatures had risen suddenly, more than 8 degrees Celsius in just a few thousand years. Oceans lost their breath. Vast stretches turned still and black, choking life below. Scientists found dead zones filled with sulfur. Creatures in the sea died off in huge numbers. Coral vanished. Fish populations collapsed. On land, plants changed shape. Forests moved north. Animals fled or died. But what had caused it? The usual guess was volcanoes, a period of eruptions called the oceanic anoxic event. But the size of the carbon release didn't match the lava flows. The amount of fuel burned seemed too big for natural processes alone. And something else stood out: the kinds of chemicals left behind. They matched what we see today from burning coal and oil, fossil fuels. But there were no humans, no cities, no machines, just reptiles and insects and swampy trees. Could nature have dug into its own crust and burned carbon that had been buried for millions of years? Maybe. But it would have had to do it fast, and in many places at once. Or maybe something else had done it, something that knew how. Other layers in the same time period showed more mysteries. Tiny glass beads, formed only under extreme heat, scattered across ancient rocks. Not from a meteor. No crater matched. Not from lava. No volcano nearby. These beads were like the ones made during industrial processes today. Factories, smelters, furnaces. Yet they were fossilized in stone more than 90 million years old. They had no business being there. In the middle of these layers, there were traces of metals not common in Earth's crust. Rare ones: ruthenium, palladium, platinum, in strange amounts. Not the kind found in nature, but the kind left behind when ore is processed and refined. It was like the leftovers of industry, melted down, discarded, forgotten. But again, who was doing the refining? Samples from Antarctica showed matching chemical signatures, far from where the event started. These markers had traveled the globe, not just in water, but in air. The dust had been carried by wind, like smoke, like pollution. It was spread thin, but it was everywhere. And the deeper they looked, the clearer it became. This had not been a slow, natural shift. It had been fast, focused, sudden. And then, just as suddenly as it began, it stopped. The carbon layer ended. The rare metals faded. The glass beads vanished. The oceans, after hundreds of thousands of years, began to breathe again. The forests returned. Life crept back. But the line in the rock stayed, black and strange and final, as if something had reached its end, or chosen to stop. There were no tools found, no skeletons holding machines, no ruins buried in the mud, just chemistry, just the burn marks left by something we couldn't see. It made some scientists uneasy, because it matched what we are doing now: the burning, the metal, the plastic, the sudden shift in temperature, the spreading of chemicals far across the world. It made them wonder, are we just repeating something that already happened? Are we walking a path already walked by someone else? What if that someone wasn't wiped out, but stepped away? Maybe they saw the damage rising and chose to change course. Maybe they stopped burning before it was too late. Or maybe they knew the end was near and built something to escape: a ship, a station, a place to go beyond Earth. The line in the rock is not a story told in words. It is a story told in heat and ash and silence, a signature left behind by something with power, something with purpose, something that changed the whole planet and then disappeared. We look now at our own time, at our factories, our fires, our skies full of smoke. We leave a similar line, a darker one, a louder one, but the shape is the same. The earth will remember us, just as it remembered them. If they were here, if they left, where did they go? Did they watch the seas die and climb into the sky? Did they write warnings in metal and hide them in stone? Or did they trust that one day, someone else, someone like us, would find the marks and understand? The ground holds the answer, but it will never speak first. We must listen. We must ask the question no one dared ask before. Were we the first to burn the world? Or just the first to ask why? In the cold, dry valleys of Antarctica, the wind moves fast but carries almost nothing. No trees to rustle, no grass to bend, no smell of animals or flowers, just rocks, ice, and silence. The air is sharp, so clear you can see forever, and buried deep under that ice, locked away for millions of years, is something stranger than any animal or plant. A message written in chemistry, in dust, in the breath of the planet itself. Scientists drilled through 2 miles of frozen layers to find it. Each layer, like a page in a book, held tiny bubbles of air, ancient air, trapped when the snow first fell. This ice was old. Some bubbles came from over 800,000 years ago, older than pyramids, older than speech, older than anything humans remember. But inside those bubbles was a surprise. They found gases, carbon dioxide, methane, nitrous oxide. That wasn't surprising by itself. These are the same gases that warm our planet today. But the levels, how much was there, and how fast it had changed, did not match what nature should have done. There were sudden jumps, like someone had turned on a giant machine, then flat lines, then drops, just as sharp, like someone had turned it off. These were not soft changes. They were jagged, hard, like steps cut into a wall. And they didn't happen just once. They happened again and again, 400,000 years ago, then 320,000, then 240,000, then 120,000. Each spike had the same shape, each drop, the same silence after. Something had pushed the planet's breath out of balance, and then disappeared. Volcanoes can do that, yes. Big eruptions throw gas into the air, but they also leave ash, glass, acid in the ice. These layers had none of that, just the gas, just the strange fingerprint of sudden change. Not once, but many times. That was the clue. Nature isn't always neat, but it doesn't repeat like that. It doesn't pause and restart the same way unless something, or someone, is controlling the dial. One layer had something even more puzzling. Inside it, scientists found tiny particles. They were dark, strong, and wouldn't break down in acid. They looked like plastic, but they weren't from our time. They were buried far too deep. The layer above them was over 100,000 years old. No humans had factories back then. No one had made plastic, not even close. But there it was. Tiny bits of something that shouldn't exist. They ran tests. Heat, pressure, chemicals. The particles stayed the same. Their structure didn't match any natural mineral. Their shape was long and twisted, like modern fibers, and they were all the same size. Nature doesn't usually do that. It makes chaos. These looked like they had been made in a lab. More cores were drilled. Greenland, Siberia, Patagonia. Again, the same patterns. Sudden greenhouse spikes, then stillness, then strange dust. The particles showed up in layers spread across the planet, as if something had once filled the air with materials we could barely understand, and then had vanished, as if it was never there. But something had been there. Something powerful, something big enough to change the air of the whole world. And not just once, many times. One core, pulled from below an old frozen lake, showed a thin black line. It was barely thicker than a fingernail, but it glistened. Under a microscope, It was full of carbon, burned carbon, the kind from fire, not from life. But there were no signs of a natural fire. No trees grew there. No volcanoes were near. Still, the carbon was there, sharp, dense, not spread by wind, but laid down gently, as if placed. Could it have come from machines? Could it have come from burning fuel? If so, who lit the fire? Who left the mark? As they looked deeper, the gases told more stories. Oxygen levels didn't just drop, they twisted. Some layers had more oxygen than they should, almost like someone had added it. Not trees, not algae, something more, something with purpose. One gas, sulfur hexafluoride, is used in our time to cool large machines. It doesn't exist in nature. It's rare, heavy, stays in the air for thousands of years. One ice core held a trace of it, in a layer from 130,000 years ago. Only a whisper, but enough to be heard. Another core showed nitrogen levels out of balance. The ratio was wrong. Too much of one isotope, too little of another. It matched what happens when air is changed by machines, compressors, engines, massive air systems. But who had built them? And why? Every answer led to a harder question. The evidence was soft, but it was there. If someone had changed the sky, they hadn't left a map. They hadn't shouted. They had only breathed, and left the air different than before. The changes weren't wild. They were precise, just enough to warm the world, just enough to shift the rain, just enough to make it comfortable for something. Was this climate control? Was it a mistake? Or was it a signal? A quiet message left in the wind? Whatever it was, it didn't last. After each spike, the air settled. The chemicals faded. The particles vanished, like someone closing the door behind them. No war, no crash, no crater, just air changed, just ice, holding its breath. And now we look at our own time, our spikes, our particles, our heat. The patterns match. We are burning, changing, breathing out more than the earth can hold, just like before. But will we vanish too? Or will we learn what the others learned? To stop, to rise, to leave? The ice holds the truth, clear and cold, and it tells us, if we listen, this has happened. More than once. The planet remembers, even if we do not. The stars came out early that night, blinking one by one into the dark sky, soft and pale like ice crystals floating in black water. A boy stood in a field, his breath white in the air, staring up without moving. The ground beneath him was frozen. The trees nearby stood still, no leaves to rustle, no wind to stir them. Above, the stars burned in silence, and he wondered, not what was out there, but what had already gone. The stars looked back, quiet as always, keeping their secrets. Across the world, in deserts, forests, and oceans, other people had looked up just like him. People in every age. Sailors in wooden boats, farmers in moonlit fields, scientists on snowy peaks. And maybe long ago, someone else had done the same. Someone not like us, but not too different either. They looked up and didn't just wonder. They prepared. They didn't wait for the ground to split or the skies to burn. They left. And the strangest part? They may have left no trace. Not because they didn't want to be found, but because they didn't need to be remembered. Maybe they believed that memory fades, but movement endures. That the best way to survive was not to dig deeper into Earth, but to rise. Every civilization we know has dreamed of flight, from birds drawn on cave walls to rockets breaking through the clouds. We reach upward, always upward, but our rockets are loud, messy, and brief. They burn and roar and fall. What if someone before us learned to fly differently, quietly, gracefully, not for war, not for power, but for escape? In the mountains of South America, high above the clouds, archaeologists found stones that puzzled them, carved shapes that resembled gliders, tiny models with wings curved just right for air travel. The shapes weren't proof, not by themselves, but they reminded us of something we couldn't name, a whisper of flight from a time that shouldn't have known wings. And in deserts far away, long lines stretch across the land, lines so straight they defy nature. No paths, no roads, just marks, drawn with such care that they can only be seen from high above. Who made them? And why? We call them art, but what if they were more? Not messages to gods, but maps, launch paths, landing zones. In caves once buried by sand, paintings show tall figures with round heads, standing beside animals that no longer exist. Their hands stretch upward. Some hold shapes like circles with rays. Some wear suits drawn with careful lines, shapes we only began to understand a century ago. Helmets, tubes, eyes behind glass. We say, it's myth, a story. But stories often begin with truth. And then there are the legends, old stories, told in whispers by fires. Stories of beings who came from the sky and left, not in chariots of fire, but in silence. They taught, they watched, then they vanished. The people left behind called them gods. But gods don't build machines. Gods don't leave behind scraps of metal shaped like parts of engines, buried beneath layers of untouched earth. At the edge of a forgotten jungle, one such piece was found. Small, flat, burned around the edges. It was tested in a lab. It wasn't stone. It wasn't metal we use today. It had no clear source. The atoms inside were arranged too neatly, like something printed, not formed. The piece didn't match anything known, and it was buried in soil too old for cities. Elsewhere, a cave held a crystal, smooth, clear, the size of a fist. But inside it were lines, tiny grooves, too small for the human eye. Under a microscope, they formed shapes, not random, not cracks, but patterns, repeating, sharp, the way we encode data now, in lines and pulses and light. But this was older than writing, older than fire. No one could explain how it got there. What if these were pieces of a trail? Not wreckage, not trash, but footprints left on purpose. Not for us, but for someone. Markers pointing not down into the earth, but up. In the last few years, scientists started to look at space differently. Not just out, but around. They began to ask, if someone left Earth before us, where would they go? Not far, not yet. Just enough to stay safe. Just outside the reach of earthquakes, floods, and time. One answer was the moon. No weather, no wind, just dust and silence. If someone had walked there long ago, their footprints might still be there. If they had built something, it might still stand. The second answer was farther, a place called Lagrange Point 2, where the pull of Earth and Sun balance perfectly. A place where satellites can sit without moving. It's cold, empty, but perfect for a quiet station. Watching Earth forever. The third answer was stranger. Inside asteroids. Hollow them out, spin them slowly, live inside the shell, safe from radiation, hidden from view. These space rock homes could float for millions of years, orbiting silently while planets below rise and fall. We've only just begun to search. Most of space remains invisible to us. We look, but we don't always see. What if someone else figured that out long ago? And what if they didn't want to be found? Not because they feared us, but because they wanted us to find our own way. What if they wanted us to look harder, to learn patience, to ask the right questions? The boy in the field still stared upward. The stars hadn't changed, but something in him had. He no longer saw them as cold lights. He saw them as doors, as mirrors, as answers waiting to be earned. If someone came before us, they didn't crash. They didn't fall. They rose, quietly, slowly. And they left Earth not as a grave, but as a cradle. The sky above us holds more than stars. It holds memory. It holds paths. And maybe, just maybe, it holds them. Still watching. Still waiting. Still wondering if we'll rise too. The ocean was calm, almost too calm, like it was hiding something. Sunlight shimmered across the waves, soft and bright. But down below, far under the surface, the water was cold, heavy, and still. A submarine glided through the deep blue shadows. Its lights cut through the dark like narrow beams from a flashlight, catching glimpses of strange shapes in the gloom. Coral towers bent like bones, fish darted away like sparks, and tiny white crabs clung to rocks that had never felt the sun. The pilot checked the map, but nothing on the screen matched what she saw outside the window. A wall. No, a structure, covered in silt, cracked and leaning, but not natural. Not made by pressure or time or water. It was made by something that once had a plan. The team inside the submarine didn't cheer. They didn't speak. They just stared. They had dived to this spot to check on methane seeps. Tiny bubbles rising from the floor, but they had found something else. Something old. Something wrong. Cameras rolled. Arms reached out to scoop silt away. What appeared was smooth, flat, with ridges too straight to be chance. A square tile, then another, then 10, all pressed together like a puzzle. Nothing living builds in squares. Later, back on the ship, they cleaned the samples. The material was hard, like stone, but didn't react to acid. It didn't burn. It didn't melt. Under a powerful microscope, the surface showed patterns, perfect repeating grooves only a few atoms wide. Not scratches, not wear, not damage. These were made on purpose, too fine for claws, too detailed for erosion. A signal? A code? A design? No one could say. The site was revisited a month later with better tools. A larger area was scanned, and what they found underneath the mud shocked even the most skeptical minds. Walls, angles, openings, cavities that didn't belong in natural rock, cables fused into stone, shapes that looked like ducts or vents, but so ancient they had fused with the seabed. Time had almost erased them. Almost. They couldn't find any writing, no doors, no screens, just emptiness and silence and the long stretch of buried lines pointing in one direction, outward, toward the open sea. Reports leaked. Some said it was a trick of the rocks. Others said it was a hoax. But more teams quietly came. More scans. More samples. One showed a trace of a compound not found on Earth. Not now, not ever. It had carbon, yes, but also something heavier, something synthetic. The bonds inside the compound were tighter than anything known. It wouldn't bend, break, or rot. Whoever built with it didn't want it to fade. They wanted it to last. Near the structure, deep core drilling hid another mystery. A pocket of gas, trapped and stable, far below where it should have escaped. When tested, the gas held xenon, an inert element, but not in natural amounts. It was separated into exact isotopes. That only happens in reactors, in power plants, in technology that can sort atoms. Nature doesn't do that. Was this a city? A station? A lab? It was too deep to be a surface building that sank. It was designed for pressure, for darkness, for cold. Maybe it was never meant to be found. Another site appeared across the planet, halfway around the globe. Same depth, same angles, same silence, as if someone had placed matching outposts at equal points, like dots in a hidden pattern. A grid not made for land, but for the sea. And in between those dots, they found cables. Or something like cables. Long tubes of strange fiber, grown into the crust, as if they had been alive once. Some still pulsed when touched. Not with light, not with heat, but with something else. Something measured only as a vibration. Slow and even, like a heartbeat too old to die. One tube, when sliced, gave off a glow. No radiation, no sound, but a soft blue haze, like moonlight underwater. It faded in under an hour. No one knew why. Tests showed an alloy with properties that didn't match anything on the periodic table, a material not from meteorites, not from mining, a material shaped, not found. Every scientist wanted to know, who made this? When? How did they survive the deep? And why was there no sign of them elsewhere? And then someone asked the question that changed the focus. What if this wasn't where they lived, but where they left from? What if these structures weren't homes, but launch bays, gateways, not to space, but to something else, somewhere else? If you were trying to escape the surface, floods, war, or fire, why not build below? Why not go deeper than time could touch? And if you were planning a journey far longer than one lifetime, you'd need time to prepare. Machines to sleep in, engines that never stop, places where the sun can't find you. And when it was time to go, you'd leave quietly. You'd seal the door. Let the water take it. Let the mud cover it. And if someone came later, maybe they'd find only pieces, hints, puzzles in the dark. But why leave Earth at all? What could push a civilization to vanish beneath the waves and not return? Some say the sun changed. Some say the Earth cracked. Others think it was a choice, to begin again somewhere new. And maybe the ocean floor wasn't just a graveyard. Maybe it was a runway, and we're only just now seeing the burn marks. Now the waves roll on, calm as ever. The ships move overhead, satellites scan from above, but the real answers lie in the quiet dark. In the cold places no one thought to look. Not until now. The sea remembers what we forget. The deep holds its secrets tighter than stone. But when it lets go, when it shows its bones, we must decide. Are we looking at the past, or at the path we're meant to follow next? The cave was warm and dry, hidden beneath a hillside covered in thick grass and moss. Outside, birds chirped and bees hummed over purple flowers, but inside, the air was still. A team of scientists moved carefully, their boots brushing dust from the stone floor. They had come not for treasure, not for fossils, but for something else. On the walls around them, shapes stretched upward in long looping lines. Hands, eyes, stars. Some symbols were clear, others were not. And right in the center, carved deep and smoothed by time, was a figure, tall, thin, with arms reaching toward the sky. But behind it was something stranger, a circle with lines across it, like an ancient wheel, or maybe something more. They scanned the carvings with light, capturing every tiny groove. The stone held more than drawings. It held layers. Under the first image, they found another, hidden for centuries. It showed not a person, but a machine, simple at first glance, but full of angles and rings and joints too exact for stone tools. There were no gears, no bolts, but everything fit together with perfect symmetry. It looked like a craft, round and flat, with smaller shapes beneath it. Triangles, maybe flames, a launch, a return. This cave wasn't alone. Across continents, other caves showed similar marks. Not copies, but echoes, as if someone had visited them all, or someone had drawn the same memories in different places. On one wall in northern Australia, a spiral stretched across the ceiling. Stars circled it, and at its center was a dot with wings. Children in villages nearby said it was the sky egg, the one that left the earth before the sea swallowed the sun. They didn't know where the story began. It had always been there. In the Sahara, under sandstone cliffs, researchers found petroglyphs showing animals no longer alive. Next to them were marks, shapes that matched star maps. But the stars were wrong. They didn't match the sky today. Some were gone. Others had shifted. When traced backward through time, the pattern matched the sky, not from 10,000 years ago, but from over 50,000, before writing, before farming, before history. Yet someone had marked them, lined them up, not just for art, but for movement, directions maybe, a guide. In a frozen cave near the Arctic, they found pigments that still glowed in the dark. mixed with crushed crystal and animal fat. They had been painted into shapes, smooth arcs, looping curves, and what looked like a planet with rings. Not Saturn. The rings were tilted wrong. Could it have been another world? Near the edge of an old volcano in South America, a team discovered stones that had been shaped and polished until they reflected light like mirrors. When placed in a circle, they bent the sun's rays into a perfect point. Heat focused without fire. They tested the stones with modern tools. The surface was harder than steel. Each one was balanced to within 1,000th of a degree. Like parts of a device, taken apart, buried, forgotten. None of these places were connected by roads. But when drawn on a map, the caves and stones formed a pattern, a grid, one that followed the Earth's magnetic lines, not its coastlines. The points matched places where energy flowed strongest, natural spots, used today by engineers to place antennas, observatories, and deep-ground sensors. Someone had known this long before we did. A new scan of one site revealed something even stranger. A thin layer beneath the cave floor, just a few centimeters thick. It shimmered under radar, flat and even, like a sheet of metal. But when dug, nothing was there. The stone looked normal, yet the scan always showed it, unchanging, unmoving, invisible to the eye. Some called it an error. Others whispered, shield, storage, signal. In another location, far below a mountain, explorers found a chamber so smooth it seemed poured, not carved. Its walls curved gently, no sharp corners. The air was still, heavy, almost humming. At the center sat a cube, covered in dust, but free of decay. When touched, it gave a soft vibration. Not loud, not sharp, but deep, like the feeling you get when thunder rolls far away. Inside the cube was nothing, at least nothing they could see. The team brought it to a lab. They measured it, scanned it, chilled it, heated it. The cube did not change, but every sensor placed near it acted strange. Batteries drained. Clocks ran fast, then slow. One magnetometer spun wildly, then stopped. Not broken, just confused. They placed the cube near a bowl of water. For hours, nothing happened. Then, without warning, ripples began to form. Gentle, rhythmic. Not from sound, not from motion, as if the cube was remembering something. And the water was listening. Old stories spoke of singing stones, of tools that worked with thought, of lights that answered without flame. These were just tales, until the cube, until the water, until the caves whispered the same shapes again and again. If these weren't just stories, then maybe someone had known how to shape matter with more than hands. Maybe they used sound, light, fields we don't understand yet. Not magic, not miracles, just science so old it looks like myth. Why leave these behind? Why place these clues in places so hard to reach? Maybe they wanted to hide. Or maybe they wanted to be found, only when we were ready. The carvings speak in silence. The stones reflect only what we bring to them. The cube vibrates, waiting. For what? For whom? There are no names, no flags, no dates, but there is purpose, something planned, built, buried. And if we keep listening, if we keep looking, maybe we'll find what they meant for us to find. Not just pieces, but the path, and the reason they left. The sun was low in the sky, casting long orange shadows across a rocky plateau where nothing moved. A team stood quietly, boots crunching on dry stone as a drone returned from its final sweep. Its camera, small and round like an eye, had captured every inch of a strange circle etched into the earth. The shape was wide, over 90 meters across, and smooth as glass. No tire marks, no cracks, no weeds, just one perfect ring, too large to see from the ground, too precise to be chance. The team knew what they had found was not natural, and it matched a pattern they had seen before, deep in the sea, in ice cores, in caves. But this one was different. This one was active. When night came, the desert cooled fast. The stones gave up their heat and the air turned sharp. The team stayed near the circle, checking signals. One sensor picked up a pulse, just one, a low hum, so soft it was more feeling than sound. It came at 2:13 a.m., then stopped. They checked the ground. No heat, no shift. But above them, the stars shimmered in a way that seemed strange, just for a second. The hum didn't return, but the shape stayed. The circle didn't glow, didn't shake, didn't open. It just remained, still, patient, and silent. Back at the lab, the data was cleaned and measured. The pulse wasn't from the Earth, not an earthquake, not thunder. Its frequency matched no known signal. Not military, not satellite. It was older, slower, like something stored deep inside stone, waiting to be woken up. Its pattern was similar to a wave found months ago in a sunken chamber halfway around the world. Same length, same speed, as if they were part of the same machine, a machine sleeping under the surface. Other teams joined. Satellites turned to scan the plateau. Heat maps, gravity scans, all showed something buried far below. A shape shaped like a disc, more than 300 meters wide, flat on the bottom, domed on top. It wasn't stone. It reflected scans in strange ways, too smooth, too round, as if it was hollow. But there was no entrance, no tunnel, no metal path. Just layers of dry earth covering something that did not belong. The oldest stories, the ones told before writing, spoke of sky drums, great wheels that sank into the earth and sang in the night. Some cultures said they were the mouths of the gods. Others said they were doors, but they all agreed. These places were not to be touched, not to be opened, not until the stars were right. The team argued. Digging could break whatever was below, but waiting might mean the signal fades. One scientist placed a small speaker near the edge of the ring and played a sound, a low tone, matching the pulse they had recorded. The ground stayed silent, but the speaker crackled. The air thickened, just for a moment. Not heat, not wind, just pressure, like the world holding its breath. They ran more tests. Lights flickered, batteries drained, watches slowed, and always, the circle stayed still. But one morning, just before sunrise, the drone caught something new, a shimmer at the center of the ring, a ripple, like heat rising off a road, but in perfect circles, spreading outward and then vanishing. No sound, no smell, just motion. They tested the soil. It was colder than the ground around it, even under full sun, like something below was pulling heat inward. Then, one by one, they began to find more circles, in China, in the Amazon, in frozen tundra, in the middle of oceans. All the same size, all placed at equal distances, all buried under time. The same shape appeared again and again in the world's oldest carvings, always near stars, always pointing to the same places in the sky. Not planets, not suns, but gaps, empty spaces where something might have been. One physicist proposed a map, not of where they went, but how. A network of launch points, each aligned with something invisible. She used an old equation, updated for deep space travel. The math showed something strange. A possible route, not across space, but through it. Not by burning fuel, but by folding the space around them. The rings were not ships, they were keys. We had thought the oldest civilizations built pyramids, roads, and fire pits. But maybe the real builders came long before that. Maybe they shaped the earth itself, not to stay, but to go. And what they left behind wasn't memory. It was machinery. What if these rings weren't made to lift things up, but to send them out? Not just from the ground, but from this reality. What if these were not rockets, but bridges, designed not for speed, but for safety? So the journey wouldn't take lifetimes, so the travelers wouldn't age, so they wouldn't have to come back. And what if the hum we heard wasn't the start, but the end? A leftover sound. The door locking behind them. If that's true, then these rings are more than ruins. They are evidence of departure, not failure, not destruction, a choice. We often wonder why we've never seen signs of other life. Maybe we're looking in the wrong places. Maybe they never meant to leave footprints, just instructions, triggers, waiting for someone else to understand. And now we stand on the edge of that circle. Our machines are ready. Our skies are full of signals. Our cities hum with power. We are close, closer than we've ever been. The question is no longer, were we first? The question is, are we next? The sun rose slow over the edge of a misty forest. Trees stood like dark towers, their tops hidden in fog. Birds chirped somewhere far off, but near the ground everything was quiet. Cold dew covered the leaves. A single path, narrow and old, wound between mossy stones. Two explorers moved through it, boots soft on the earth. They carried no weapons, only tools, cameras, and notes from the last site they visited, the one with the buried ring. This path led to another point on the same strange line, a place not marked on maps. Locals called it the Eye of the Hollow. They didn't go near it. They said the ground there whispered when you stood still. The forest cleared. At the top of a small hill, a shallow dip stretched across the clearing, about 70 meters wide. No trees grew in the circle. The grass was short, almost trimmed, though no one ever came here. The soil was too hard to dig, too dry for roots. The explorers scanned the shape with a drone. Once again, the circle was perfect. No breaks, no odd bumps, just quiet geometry that didn't belong in nature. One of them knelt and placed a small black cube near the edge. A sensor. It hummed softly, then turned green. Power flowed through the stone beneath it. The same as before. This was the 11th site. Each had followed the same strange math. Distances based on the size of Earth's core. Positions tied not to continents, but to invisible lines that wrapped around the planet like threads. The team had found them using satellite scans and ancient maps. They hadn't expected the math to work, but it did. Every ring, every site, matched the next. Whoever made them had known the world better than we did. One explorer looked down at the stone again. She brushed away a thin layer of dust. Underneath, there was a mark. It looked like a spiral, but tighter, like a fingerprint carved in rock. She took a picture. Later, they would realize the spiral wasn't just a shape. It was a time code. The turns matched planetary shifts. The spiral told a story, one that stretched back not thousands, but millions of years. They set up camp beside the circle and waited. At sunset, the temperature dropped quickly. No animals came near. No insects buzzed. Just wind brushing low grass and the soft beep of the sensor as it caught tiny pulses rising from below. Not steady, not loud. Just enough to feel, like a signal being sent again and again, waiting for someone to answer. The next morning, a third member arrived, an expert in sound. He placed a microphone near the center of the ring and began to listen. What he found wasn't a hum or a buzz. It was a pattern of clicks, spaced far apart. At first, he thought it was background noise. Then he noticed something strange. The clicks were in pairs, a short one, then a long one, like a code. Not Morse, but similar. As if someone had built a drum into the earth and was tapping out a message every 5 minutes. Far away, in a lab across the ocean, another team listened too. They had built software to compare signals from each site. What they discovered left them silent. Every ring pulsed the same code, but not at the same time. Instead, each ring sent its message in turn, one after the other, around the globe, every 12 hours. Like a clock, a great system ticking across continents, speaking to itself. Waiting. What was it counting down to? One theory came quickly. The Earth spins. It tilts. It shifts a little each year, but at certain times, all the rings align perfectly with points in space, empty spots far away, where gravity pulls just enough to open something. Not a hole, not a door, but a path. The data showed that the next full alignment would come in 38 days. That left little time. Each team rushed to confirm the pattern. More sensors, more drones, more pressure. News had not yet leaked, but inside certain rooms, the tension rose like steam. If the rings were part of something larger, something waiting for a moment to wake, then what would happen when the moment came? Some said we should step back. Leave it alone. Let the earth speak without us. Others said we had to stay. This might be the only time the signal came in our lives, in thousands of years, maybe ever. In the forest ring, the team listened carefully. At night, they sat in a circle, watching the stars appear one by one. In the quiet, they could hear the pulse. It didn't feel cold anymore. It felt familiar, like the heartbeat of a sleeping giant, like breath under stone. One night, as fog rolled in, the ring shimmered. Only for a second. A ripple moved from the center to the edge, like the surface of water touched by wind. Then it stopped. No light, no sound. But the moss around the center turned pale. Not dead, just changed. They collected samples. Inside the cells of the moss, something had shifted. Not the DNA, but the energy. A low hum inside the plant, as if the ring had spoken to it, or fed it. What were these places really for? Were they machines? Homes? Engines? Or something even older? Memory holders? Not to be used, but to be remembered, like a song played only when the tune is needed again. Back in the lab, the recordings from all 11 rings were lined up, and something new appeared. Between each pulse was a tiny silence, measured, exact. When those silences were turned into numbers, then into tones, then into images, they formed a shape, a simple one, a circle with 3 dots inside it. At first it meant nothing, but on the 12th day, the 12th ring was found, in a deep valley in Iceland, under ice and ash. The same circle, the same silence, the same hum. But this time, the center was different. It was open, a hollow, as if something had left and not come back. The clock was still ticking, the hum was still rising, and now, Earth was listening. The ice cracked with a sound like a tree splitting in half. Sharp, sudden, and deep. It echoed off the frozen cliffs surrounding the valley in Iceland, where the 12th ring lay half buried under snow and black ash. The scientists stepped back, their boots slipping slightly on the uneven surface. One of them looked down at the center of the ring, now a wide hollow that hadn't been there the day before. The ground wasn't broken. It had sunken in, smooth and exact, like the lid of a container being drawn inward. Steam rose from the center in thin, white threads. Not hot, not boiling, just warm enough to lift quietly into the cold air. Something below had stirred. The valley had been still for thousands of years. No one lived nearby. The wind here howled too loud, and the earth never felt safe. Old stories warned of ghosts that spoke through stone and ice. But now, something else was speaking. The 12th ring was not like the others. Its pulse was steady, strong, and louder than all the rest. A deep hum vibrated through the snow. The team's equipment shook every hour on the dot. Inside the tents, digital clocks began to flicker. Some sped up. Others froze. Batteries drained in minutes. The leader of the team ordered more backup power. But even solar panels stopped working when placed near the center. It was like the ring didn't want to be recorded. It wanted to be felt. Below the ring, scans showed a void stretching 190 meters down. Perfectly round. Perfectly cold. No signs of metal, rock, or ice. Just empty space, shaped like a bowl. But the bottom wasn't flat. It curved gently inward, and in the center, there was something small, less than a meter across. Shaped like a seed, but glowing. The team sent down a camera, slow and steady. It passed layers of frozen earth and then stopped at the edge of the chamber. The glow from the seed pulsed softly, golden white, like a firefly blinking in a jar. The surface was smooth, like glass, but it gave off no heat. The camera zoomed in. The seed had grooves, not scratches, lines, perfectly carved into spiral paths, wrapping around it like rings of a tree. They were not random. They were measured, spaced like music. Later, someone would convert them into tones, and those tones would form a pattern. A simple song made of 4 repeating notes, soft, slow, familiar. When the sound was played near the ring above, the hum stopped, not faded, stopped. And for 27 seconds, the valley was silent, completely silent. Even the wind paused. The world held its breath. Then the ring pulsed once, sharp, clear, and every device in the valley reset at the exact same time. 3 Gaho AM local. That moment became known as the ping. It wasn't random, it wasn't a glitch, it was the first real response. Not from the earth, but from something inside it. After the ping, everything changed. The rings across the world began to sync. Their hums aligned. Their pulses followed a rhythm. Not random anymore, but ordered, like gears in a machine waking from sleep. Each ring lit up, not with visible light, but with magnetic force. Birds flew away, wolves howled in forests, whales changed their songs. Something deep inside nature felt it. In the labs, the seed's glow began to brighten. Scientists argued over what to do. Some wanted to extract it. Others warned against touching it at all. The lead geologist said it was not just an object. It was a trigger. If removed, it might change everything, but it was already too late. The seed was not waiting for us. It was counting down. They discovered the spiral wasn't just art. It was a clock. Each line marked time. One loop every 10,800 years. And now, the last loop was glowing brighter than the rest. They calculated the end of the final spiral. It pointed to a day just 5 weeks away. Back at the surface, satellite scans showed small changes. The Earth's magnetic field was shifting, not in large ways, but in patterns. The changes centered around the rings. A curve here, a pulse there, like magnets being aligned for something bigger. And in space, a satellite that had passed over the poles for 11 years suddenly lost signal, only when it crossed the ring's line. The rings weren't just waiting, they were preparing. And all at once, the theory that seemed impossible became clear. These rings weren't built for travel, they were built for return. What if the first civilization didn't just leave? They left something behind, something asleep, something buried on purpose, a signal that could bring them back. Or maybe not them, but something they created, something they trusted to wake only when Earth was ready again. The rings didn't open, they didn't fly, they pulsed gently, like a beacon, calling across time, maybe across space, maybe not outward, but inward, across dimensions we barely understand, layers of reality that fold, echo, and repeat. If the seed was the key, the rings were the doors, and they were beginning to unlock themselves. The countdown was not to destruction, it was to contact. But with who? And what would they say when they arrived? No one knew. But deep in the frozen valley, under layers of ice and silence, the earth whispered a question of its own. Were we ever alone, or just the latest to forget? Under a thick gray sky, a slow rain fell across the salt flats of Bolivia. The ground looked like a giant mirror, reflecting the clouds above until sky and earth seemed to touch. In the middle of the wide, empty space stood a small, silver tower, just 2 meters tall, thin, smooth, no markings, no bolts or doors. It had appeared after the 12th ring sent out the ping. Satellites first noticed it, a line of bright heat where there had been none before. Local pilots flew over it and said it looked like a pencil standing in glass, but no one could say how it got there. It had not been seen the day before. It had not been built. It had simply arrived. The tower pulsed with a soft blue light, steady as a heartbeat. Scientists came in trucks and helicopters, their wheels sliding over the wet salt. They took pictures, sent drones. Nothing touched the tower. Every drone stopped working within 2 meters. Cameras went black. Batteries died. And yet, from a distance, it hummed, just like the rings. That night, lightning struck the flats, not once, but 12 times. Each bolt landed in a perfect circle around the tower, never touching it. The tower didn't glow brighter, it didn't move. But afterward, the flat ground rippled, lightly, as if something deep below had taken a breath. The team set up camp nearby. One scientist placed a sensor on a metal pole, pointed at the tower. At midnight, the sensor picked up a vibration, very small, like a whisper in a sealed room. The sound was almost the same as the signal from the seed in Iceland. But here, it had more shape. When graphed, it showed a wave that curved inward, dipped, then rose. It matched something found in old records, a pattern once seen in deep space, in a distant pulse that had no known source. The tower was not a symbol. It was a response. The next day, a message came from another site. In the Namib Desert, a similar tower had appeared. Then one in Antarctica, then Siberia, then Western Australia. 12 in all. Always in places where no one could reach easily. Always in places where the Earth's magnetic lines crossed the ring grid. Every tower identical. Every tower humming. Every tower perfectly placed. The towers did not arrive randomly. They matched the pattern of the rings. They completed it. Where the rings lay flat and silent in the earth, the towers rose like beacons. 12 rings, 12 towers. Together, they made a shape that could only be seen from space. A perfect dodecahedron. A shape with 12 points, used in math, in design, and sometimes in nature, where symmetry means balance. The towers were not built by hand. No tool marks. No seams. Their material was unknown. Lighter than titanium. Harder than diamond. Yet smooth as water. When touched, they felt cool, like stone under shade. But when pressed, they gave slightly, like skin. And under high-frequency sound, the towers began to change color. Blue to violet, then back to blue. Not random. Controlled. People began to ask the question everyone had feared. Were the towers calling something? Or had something already answered? News leaked, photos spread. Some thought it was a hoax. Others feared war. Some believed it was a message from the past, now waking in the present. But in quiet rooms, the scientists studied the signals. One found a repeating code inside the hum, a simple loop of 3 tones. When turned into sound, it played a pattern like a lullaby. 4 notes, again and again, just like the seed. The towers began to change at dawn. Each one lit up for 6 seconds at the same moment. Not flashing, not shining, but glowing from inside, like light waking under skin. And after the glow faded, the pulse of each tower grew stronger. They began to sync, clicking softly, one after the other, in a rhythm that moved around the Earth every 12 minutes, a heartbeat, a countdown. One physicist suggested that the towers were aligning a field, not a signal, but space itself, folding it, preparing it. For what, they didn't know. But the math showed that when all 12 pulses reached their peak, something strange would happen. Gravity would shift, just enough to notice. Light would bend, just enough to curve, and time, they warned, might not flow the same. A child near one of the towers said she heard music when she closed her eyes. Not from the air, from the ground. Soft and low, like a song played deep underfoot. She sang the tune for her mother, who recorded it and sent it to researchers. When they played the song through speakers near the tower, the light inside grew brighter. The hum grew louder. And for one moment, the tower shimmered. Not like metal, but like a window. If the towers were doors, they were not locked. Not anymore. The towers were not built for us, but they were left for us. That much had become clear. They waited, quiet, through floods, storms, fires, and time. They slept under ice and dust, until Earth reached the right moment, until the rings hummed, until the seed glowed. And now, the towers answered. Each one sat quietly now, as clouds moved above them and the air cooled. But under the surface, deep in the crust, something else was moving. Seismographs didn't shake, but tiny shifts were recorded. Waves inside stone, like thoughts in a sleeping mind. The earth was waking, and it was not alone. The wind blew hard across the Pacific Ocean, pushing dark waves toward a rocky island far from any city. This place had no name, only numbers on old maps. A ring was buried deep below it, one of the 12. The tower nearby stood silent and glowing. It faced the sky, waiting as the waves crashed below. But on this day, something new happened. At exactly 2:47 p.m. local time, the light inside the tower shifted. Blue turned white, then gold, then something no one could name. A color that didn't look like light, more like thought. High above, a satellite picked up a sudden burst of gravity. Not strong, just enough to pull its orbit off by 0.004 centimeters. It corrected itself, but the change was real. Ground stations reported it. One scientist stared at the numbers, then back at the tower feed. They matched. Whatever was waking up down there had touched space. The island tower wasn't alone. All 12 towers began to hum louder. Each one followed a pattern. 3 short pulses, then a pause, then 3 long ones. Over and over. The sound passed through the earth, deep into rock, bouncing between the rings like voices between walls. Every few hours, the tone changed slightly. Not a mistake, a message, but not for us. People across the world started noticing strange things. Not just the scientists, not just the ones near the rings. Birds flew in strange patterns. Schools of fish gathered in circles near the coasts. Glaciers cracked at odd angles, breaking in perfect lines. Clouds spun into slow spirals above the desert towers. And always, there was the hum, too low for most to hear, but not too low to feel. In the chest, in the stomach, like a deep drum in the bones. Children said their dreams had changed. In one village, 3 kids drew the same picture without speaking to each other. A large ring floating above the ocean, with a light coming out of it like a staircase. No one had told them about the towers, but their drawing matched the layout of the island perfectly. Meanwhile, deep beneath Antarctica, something else was stirring. A new ring, one no one had found, sent out a signal for the first time in 11,000 years. It came not in sound, but in magnetic waves. It flowed through the planet like a ripple through a bell. Instruments caught it. The signal made compasses spin, made clock hands stop. For a full 8 seconds, time itself seemed confused. When the wave passed, a layer of ice near the South Pole cracked. Underneath it, scientists discovered a perfect dome, 340 meters wide, made of black stone that reflected no light. It hadn't been placed there by nature. Its edges were straight. Its height never changed. It was built long ago, but not by any culture we know. As the scientists explored the dome, they found markings etched into its side. Spiral lines. Rings inside rings. Not words, not numbers. More like movement written down. When traced with a laser, the lines produced a sound, not from the machine, but from the dome itself. It began to sing. Not loud, not sharp. A low, slow tone like wind blowing through a bottle. It didn't stop. It didn't change. It just kept playing. A single note held for hours. At the same time, people living near fault lines reported feeling strange before earthquakes. 3 minutes before, not after. Dogs howled in places with no shaking. Lights flickered in caves. Old watches began to tick backward. The earth wasn't breaking. It was shifting. Each tower began to tilt. Not much, just 3.6 degrees. But they all tilted the same direction, toward a point in the sky. Not a star, not a planet, just an empty patch of space near the constellation Lyra. Astronomers stared at it. No signal, no heat, nothing. But the towers knew something we didn't, and they were listening. The towers and rings now formed a complete system, a web across the earth. The signals were faster, the pulses stronger, the humming steadier. The earth's magnetic field began to react, twisting gently, not enough to hurt, but enough to bend the northern lights. In places far from the poles, people saw green skies, purple ribbons of light. Even during the day, the world was waking up. News could no longer hide the truth. Pictures spread fast. The 12 towers glowed bright. The rings vibrated. Governments formed quiet teams. Satellites were re-aimed. Emergency broadcasts were tested. And still, the towers said nothing. They didn't speak. They didn't stop. They only pointed. One morning, as the sun rose over the Pacific Tower, a single beam of light shot straight into the sky. Thin as a needle, white as paper, it touched the clouds, then passed through them. No heat, no sound, but it stayed. It didn't fade. It didn't bend. It just stood there, rising up into space, touching nothing. Within 5 minutes, the other towers did the same. 12 beams, 12 lines from earth to sky. Together they made a shape no one had seen before. Not a triangle, not a star, but something else. Something old, something written in stones, in myths, in dreams. And somewhere, very far away, but not too far to hear, something answered. Not in light, not in sound, but in time. A pulse came back. Faint, delayed, but real. It touched the top of each beam and slid down slowly. And when it reached the rings, the ground grew quiet. For the first time in millions of years, Earth was not alone, not waiting, not calling, listening. The light beams kept rising, straight and thin, even as the sky darkened with clouds. Rain fell gently on the Pacific Tower, but the beam didn't flicker. It stayed strong, steady, like it was holding up the sky. All 12 towers still pointed to that same spot in the stars. Not a planet, not a sun, just a quiet place in the dark. Yet now, something had moved there, not seen with eyes, not caught by normal tools. But the pulse had come from it. Slow, deep, heavy like a drumbeat in the bones of the earth. At first, people thought it was just a bounce, a reflection of the tower's signals. But then the pattern shifted. A pause. Then a new tone. A new shape. When mapped, the pulse looked like a spiral turning inward. That same spiral found on the seed, found on the dome, found on the moss that glowed. It was their sign. And now, it was pulsing back. Across the earth, the towers began to pulse in a new rhythm, one after the other. Every 5 minutes, one beam would glow brighter for 10 seconds, then dim, then the next, like a wave of light circling the globe, round and round. In South Africa, a group of scientists stood on a flat hill watching the sky. They had been studying ancient rocks called banded iron formations. These rocks, almost 3 billion years old, had strange marks. Tiny dots that no one could explain. The dots were always in groups of 12. Some in a line, some in a circle, but always 12. That morning, they looked at one stone again and saw something new. When the pattern was traced and overlaid on a map, it matched the position of the 12 towers exactly. The marks weren't art. They were memory. Someone had known this would happen before the continents even took their modern shape. The rings, the towers, the beams, all planned, all timed, all waiting. In cities around the world, strange things began to happen. Phones buzzed with no signal. Old radios played soft static with a hum under it. People began to dream of staircases made of light. of round doors floating in the sky, of voices that didn't speak words, but feelings: calm, wonder, warning. In deep caves below Japan, the signal was picked up again, louder now. It echoed through the rock like wind through hollow stone. The caves were once home to stories of gods that lived beneath the earth. The match was too close. The shapes in the caves, carved with stone, were spirals and circles, and 12 dots carved in a ring. The signal grew stronger. In the Arctic, the dome found under the ice began to glow. Its black surface turned silver, and then it opened. Slowly, a single crack down the middle, not like a door, but like a flower blooming in slow motion. Inside was a smooth silver room, round as a drop of water, 30 meters wide. In the center was a chair, simple, made of the same silver, floating 2 centimeters off the floor. It did not rest on anything, it just hovered, waiting. Scientists lowered a drone inside. The moment it passed the crack, its feed turned to static. Its camera froze, but a sound played through its mic, 4 tones, rising and falling, just like the ones from the towers. And behind the sound, something else, a second pattern, faster, tighter, like a breath between words. At the same time, one of the towers, the one in Namibia, dimmed, just for 1 minute. Then it pulsed bright, brighter than ever before. And in that moment, the Earth itself seemed to pause. Seismographs flatlined, wind slowed, birds froze mid-flight. Time didn't stop, but it felt like something had held the world still, just long enough to listen. Then came the real change. Satellites above Earth captured a shimmer, thin, soft, like heat rising off pavement. But it wasn't heat, it was space itself bending. The shimmer wasn't just around the towers, it was between them, a web of faint lines connecting every beam. The Earth had become a shape, not just a sphere, but a tool, a receiver, or maybe a key. People began to gather near the towers, not crowds, not angry, just quiet groups, watching, waiting. They didn't speak much. Many didn't know why they had come. They just felt pulled, like something inside them remembered. Maybe not their minds, but something deeper. Children drew pictures in the dirt. Some made spirals. Others drew tall shapes with beams coming out. A girl in Peru drew a staircase rising into the clouds, just like the child in Iceland. She didn't know about the other drawings, but they were all the same. All over the world, people started remembering things they had never been taught, words and dreams, shapes they didn't know how to explain, feelings of being watched, not in fear, but in care, as if something was checking on them. Slowly, gently, the towers kept pulsing. Then one tower stopped, the one in Bolivia. Its beam faded. Its hum went quiet. For 6 seconds, it was still. Then it changed. The light bent downward. The beam, once shooting into the sky, now pointed to the ground, straight down into the earth, and the ground began to glow. Not hot, not breaking, just lit from within, like the skin of the world had light beneath it. Then the tower vanished. Not exploded, not taken, just gone. Where it had stood, a ring now lay, twin to the ones found earlier. But this one pulsed with golden light. A ring reborn. The towers were not just speaking, they were becoming. And the earth was no longer a quiet world spinning alone. It was alive and changing. Fog rolled over the Greenland coast in thick, slow waves, like a sleeping breath spreading across the sea. The last remaining tower, still standing tall near the ancient ice cliffs, glowed faintly through the mist. Its light was softer now, not weaker but gentler, like it knew what was coming. All the other towers had vanished one by one, each folding into the earth and leaving behind a glowing ring. 11 times it had happened. Always quiet, always clean, never with damage. No smoke, no crater, just smooth, humming circles where tall spires had once reached toward the stars. This one would be the last. The scientists at the site stood silent, watching monitors that showed nothing out of place. No heat, no seismic change, no odd gravity shifts, but they felt it in their chests, in their skin, that same stillness before something changes, like standing at the edge of a cliff and knowing the wind is about to rise. One of them held a small device built to track magnetic fields. It began to buzz softly. The needle shook, not side to side, but in a slow circle, round and round, the same direction as the spirals on the seed, on the dome, on the moss. The direction never changed. Always clockwise, always inward. Then, at 4:12 p.m., Greenland time, the tower gave its last pulse, a single bright flash that painted the fog gold. The light faded, the hum stopped, and in complete silence, the tower disappeared, not into smoke, not into space, but simply away, like it had never been there. In its place, the last ring glowed, completing the pattern. Now all 12 rings pulsed in perfect rhythm. Together, they formed a circle around the globe. From Iceland to the Pacific, from Antarctica to Africa, a great wheel, invisible to the eye, but clear to every satellite. The Earth had become a map, a shape, a signal. People everywhere stopped what they were doing, not from fear, not from panic, but from something deeper, a knowing. They looked at the sky, though they didn't know why. In every country, children stood still and pointed upward. No planes flew, no birds moved, even the clouds paused. The pulse from the rings was no longer a hum, it was a tone, a low, soft sound that filled the air without making a sound. People felt it in their teeth, in their bones, in their thoughts. The tone didn't hurt, it didn't press, it simply was. Steady, slow, certain, and then something strange happened. Time slipped, just a little. Clocks drifted. Watches ticked too fast, then too slow. For about 7 seconds, nothing mechanical worked exactly right, and then everything snapped back into place. But now the stars were in slightly different spots. Not wrong, just early, as if the Earth had spun a tiny bit too fast. Astronomers later said we had lost 4 milliseconds. No one knew where they went, but something had shifted. A new layer of the ring signal revealed itself. It wasn't just a tone anymore. It carried data, not words, not pictures, but instructions, patterns, shapes. When mapped onto a 3D model of Earth, the pulses formed a spiral that started near the South Pole and slowly wrapped around the planet, rising upward in a perfect curve. The spiral ended in the sky, right where the towers had pointed, right where the returning pulse had come from. The rings were not calling anymore. They were opening. In Iceland, at the original seed site, the silver chamber that had held the glowing object now pulsed faster. The seed lifted off its pedestal, just 1 inch into the air, spinning slowly. The lines on its surface, once dim grooves, now glowed bright white, then golden, then something no human had seen before. The glow bent slightly, as if the light itself wanted to curve inward. At that moment, deep underground, the space below the ring split open with no sound. The ice didn't melt. The rock didn't crack. It just changed. The space became bigger than it was, wider, like the room had forgotten what size it was supposed to be. And in the center of that impossible space floated a sphere. Not a machine, not alive, but full of movement. Like a galaxy trapped inside a bubble. It spun slowly, and every time it turned, a new shape appeared in its surface. Faces, places, spirals, lights. Memories not our own, pictures from no one's camera, stories and flashes. A boy walking through a red forest. A city made of smooth stone under 3 suns. A boat sailing across a sky made of water. No one spoke. No one dared. Above the earth, satellites caught one more shimmer, this time much larger. It wrapped around the whole planet, not a shield, not a wall, but a bubble, a soft curve of space that bent light just enough to see from orbit. And then, outside that bubble, something moved. At first it looked like nothing, a ripple, a shape behind the stars. But slowly it came closer, not flying, not falling, just arriving. The stars behind it bent and flickered, and the shape grew clearer. Not a ship, not a person, a form made of light, changing every second, never the same twice. It was large, very large, almost the size of the moon, but silent. It stopped outside the bubble and waited. It didn't speak. It didn't move closer. It just hovered, watching or listening, maybe both. The rings kept pulsing, the seed kept spinning, and the earth, wrapped in a soft shimmer, held its breath. What happens next would not be up to us. Above the earth, the shimmer stayed still like a calm lake floating in space. The strange shape behind it, huge, glowing, and always changing, watched without blinking, without speaking. It didn't move forward. It didn't drift back. It simply remained, silent and steady, like a thought waiting to be heard. Below, the 12 rings glowed in perfect rhythm, their golden light pulsing every 12 minutes. They looked like eyes opened wide, shining through oceans, forests, deserts, and ice. The earth was lit from within now, as if its own skin remembered something old and deep. Not fear, not danger. Something else. Something ready. In Iceland, the seed floated 2 inches above its pedestal. It spun slower now, and every few turns, it stopped for 1 full second. Each time it paused, a new pattern lit up along its surface. Spirals, then circles, then jagged marks like old runes. Scientists took pictures. They tried matching the shapes to old carvings, cave drawings, and even mountain ridges. One shape matched a hill in Chile. Another matched a fossil bed in Australia. They were not just patterns. They were maps. Not of places, but of paths. Paths that no longer existed. Rivers that dried up millions of years ago. Stars that moved long before humans looked up. The scientists thought they were looking at history. But what if they were looking at memory? And not just Earth's memory, but the memory of something else. The dome in Antarctica kept humming. Inside, the floating chair still sat untouched. The air around it shimmered, almost like heat but cooler. A woman in the research team stood close and felt her hair rise, like the air was thick with silent electricity. She placed her hand near the chair, not touching it, just near. Her fingers felt warm, not burned, not cold, just warm, like standing near sunlight in winter. She pulled back, unsure. But then something odd happened. Her watch beeped. It wasn't set to beep. She looked down and saw the time blinking backward, then forward. Then it stopped. 4:44. All over the world, clocks began showing that same time. Not broken, not stuck, just unified. The whole world paused at 4:44, and for exactly 64 seconds, no machines recorded time moving. But people still breathed. Hearts still beat. The wind still blew. It was as if the world had taken a step to the side, just slightly off the path it was on. And then, a sound. Not from the sky, not from the towers, from inside the earth. It was deep, soft, and steady, like a drum far underground. Every ring across the world vibrated, not shaking, not rumbling, vibrating like a tuning fork. The tone echoed upward through rock, water, and air. People could feel it in their feet, their chests, even their teeth. Dogs looked up, birds flew low to the ground. Whales turned circles in the oceans. Everything living seemed to notice. The sound only lasted 3 minutes. But when it stopped, things were different. Plants began to bloom out of season. Old trees that hadn't flowered in years opened white petals. Deserts smelled like rain. And in some forests, moss on the trees glowed at night, pale green like moonlight. The shimmer in space grew brighter. The shape behind it pulsed once, just once. A single flash, like lightning trapped inside a bubble. Not fast, not blinding, just enough to make the stars around it blink out for a moment. The flash didn't hurt, but satellites shut down. Not forever, just long enough to be reset. As if someone, something, had brushed their edges, saying, "Wait." The scientists watching the orbit gasped. One of the older machines, a backup satellite launched 20 years ago, began showing pictures it wasn't designed to take. Not of the stars, not of the Earth, but of something else. Inside the shimmer, the space began to bend. It bent inward, then stretched, then curled like smoke in slow motion. A hole opened, not black, not empty, but full of color. Colors people couldn't name, that looked like feelings instead of light. The hole wasn't spinning, but everything around it swirled. And then, something came through. It was not a ship, not a person, not a monster. It was a presence, like a cloud made of thought. It moved like silk in water, flowing gently down the shimmer, never touching it but never stopping. It drifted toward Earth, but not fast. It took its time, like it had waited millions of years and could wait a few minutes more. As it moved, the rings glowed brighter, the seeds spun faster, and the dome in Antarctica opened wider. The floating chair rose higher, now 6 inches off the ground. The woman returned. She didn't speak. She didn't cry. She just stared at the chair. And for one moment, she smiled. The shape above the planet slowed its approach. The shimmer thickened, as if to protect the Earth, or maybe to guide what was coming. People across the world looked up, and even those who didn't believe felt something inside them shift. Some wept. Some laughed. Some simply stood still, holding hands with strangers. It wasn't fear. It was recognition. The air grew warmer by just 1 degree. The skies cleared across 5 continents. No satellites fell. No lights went out. But all across Earth, a single word bloomed in people's minds, not heard with ears but known deep inside. Return. That was all. No message. No warning. Just return, as if someone had knocked on the door of a house long left behind, and found the lights still on, and the table still set, and the door still open. What came next would not be noise. It would not be fire. It would not be war. What came next would be reunion. The air felt thick, like standing underwater without getting wet. The shimmer around Earth now glowed so gently it was almost invisible during the day, but at night it painted the sky with soft waves, green, violet, deep gold, like an aurora that never moved, only breathed. The great shape above the planet had slowed its motion, but not stopped. It hovered now, still behind the shimmer, casting no shadow, making no sound. It looked less like an object and more like a question, curved and shifting, full of meanings no one could quite name. It did not blink. It did not break. It simply watched. Down below, the 12 glowing rings pulsed in slow rhythm, one ring brightening every 5 minutes, like the heartbeat of the planet spreading across time zones. And in that rhythm, something changed. From each ring, a soft mist began to rise. It was not smoke. It was not steam. It smelled like nothing and did not burn the skin. But it glowed faintly, just like the moss on the Iceland rocks, and curled upward in thin, twisting lines, always rising, always lifting. Not high, only about 4 meters. Then it spread out, drifting into the air like breath in winter. In some places, the mist drifted into towns. It did not choke. It did not hide. People walked through it. And it clung gently to their clothes like dew. No one panicked. Even animals didn't seem afraid. A boy in Kenya reached out his hand and said the mist tickled. A woman in Brazil whispered that the air tasted sweeter than before. Bees flew slower. Birds circled lower. Everywhere, the world softened. In the dome beneath Antarctica, the chair now hovered 1 full foot off the ground. The air around it shimmered with pale blue light, and soft symbols blinked across the walls of the silver room. These were not words anyone could read, but they repeated like a heartbeat. Left, center, right, then pause. A pattern. The woman who had first stood near the chair returned. This time, she didn't stop. She stepped into the room, slow and careful. No one told her to. No one stopped her. But everyone watching, on screens through glass from above, held their breath. When her foot touched the smooth floor, the dome began to hum, not loudly, but clearly. The same tone heard long ago from the seed in Iceland, the same tone that echoed through the towers before they vanished. The hum didn't ask. It welcomed. She walked to the chair. It did not lower. She did not sit. She stood beside it, placed her hand on its edge, and closed her eyes. For 10 seconds, nothing moved. Then the mist rose higher. Across all 12 rings, the mist now climbed to 15 meters, curling into long fingers of light. And in each location, the mist began to form a shape, always the same. A tall spiral, slowly turning clockwise, with a circle at the top. Like a question mark without the dot. People around the world took pictures, shared videos. Scientists scanned the air. The mist was made of particles never seen before, lighter than air, but heavier than smoke, carrying tiny pulses of electric current that moved without wires, as if the air itself had become a signal. All across Earth, lights flickered. Not off, not broken, just a little brighter, just a little softer, like the planet had taken a deep breath. Then, without warning, the mist stopped rising. It froze in midair. The spirals held still, and every person standing near a ring heard the same sound. Not from outside, but from inside their own chest. 4 soft notes. Rising, then falling, like a question being asked, but asked kindly. And for the first time, someone answered. In Iceland, the seed spun 3 times fast, and then stopped completely. It dropped to the pedestal without a sound, but the room around it filled with white light, and a soft wind blew outward in a perfect circle, knocking nothing over, just brushing everything gently like a whisper. Then the wall behind the pedestal opened. Inside was a staircase, not stone, not metal, just light. It glowed white, then silver, then pale gold, as if it couldn't decide what it wanted to be. It didn't go up. It didn't go down. It went forward, into something that didn't yet exist. Not a tunnel, not a door, more like an idea stretched out into shape. The woman in Antarctica opened her eyes. She was smiling. The chair beside her lowered to the floor, and for the first time, it spoke, not with sound, not with words, but with images, flashing behind the eyes of every person near the rings. A spiral of stars turning in a dark sky. A tall city with towers made of water. A hand reaching toward another, and then gently touching. A face, not human, but kind. A journey, a leaving, and a promise. We said we would return. Every person felt it at once. The rings weren't machines. They were memory. The towers weren't tools. They were invitations. And the thing above the planet wasn't a stranger. It was family. Very old. Very far, but not forgotten. The skies shimmered brighter now. A soft bell rang, not in the ears, but in the chest. Once, then silence. And then one of the mist spirals broke apart, not falling, but unfolding. The mist drifted back to the ground, revealing a doorway made of nothing but light. It stood 3 meters tall. Its edges curved like water in motion. And inside it, nothing but stars. Someone would have to step through, but not yet. The world was still breathing, still remembering, still deciding. And the sky, soft and patient, waited. The doorway of light stood perfectly still, not flickering, not shaking, just there, 3 meters tall, 1.5 wide, shaped like a raindrop stretched upward, its edges glowing like soft moonlight in water. It did not open because someone called it. It opened because someone remembered. All around the Iceland ring, the mist curled lower to the ground. The air felt thick but gentle. No wind blew, but grass leaned inward toward the doorway, as if pulled by something they couldn't see. A bird landed near the light. It chirped once, looked around, and flew through. Nothing happened. It did not vanish. It did not burn. It simply passed through and was gone. People watched from behind glass, hills, trees, rooftops. No one stepped forward at first. The woman from Antarctica was still far away, but she had seen it too. On every screen, in every lab, across 12 countries and hundreds of languages, the message was the same. The doorway wasn't forcing anything. It wasn't calling everyone. It was waiting for one. The seed in Iceland had stopped spinning. The dome in Antarctica had gone still. The chair no longer hovered. All the movement had paused, like the whole earth had taken one deep breath and now held it. A child stepped forward. She couldn't have been older than 10. No one told her to go. No one stopped her either. She had long black hair and wore a red coat, even though it wasn't cold. Her shoes were too big. Her eyes were wide, but not scared. She didn't look at the cameras or the people or even the ring. She looked only at the light. Each step she took made the grass press flat but not break. The wind moved around her gently, tugging her coat. She didn't speak, she didn't wave. She simply walked until she stood just 1 foot from the doorway. And then she reached out her hand. The light didn't flare. It didn't suck her in. It just touched her fingers like warm water. And something changed. Not outside. Inside. The doorway widened. Only by 10 centimeters. But it was enough. The light grew softer. And behind it, the shape became clearer. It wasn't a room. It wasn't a ship. It was a path. Stars stretched in a spiral, slow and wide, and in the center, a place that looked like a city floating in space. No roads, no buildings, just smooth shapes connected by light. And at the far end of the path, a figure stood, tall, still, glowing. Not human, but familiar. It had no face, no eyes, no mouth. But somehow the child smiled. The figure didn't move, but the air around it shimmered with pictures. A great ocean turning red beneath twin moons, a ring of mountains floating above clouds, a garden made of glass and sound, and the child saw it all in one blink. Behind her, the earth watched, still silent, still waiting. The shimmer above the planet now pulsed like a heartbeat, one slow thump every 20 seconds. The object beyond the shimmer, the strange, massive shape, remained unmoving, but the stars behind it began to twist. Not break, not explode, just bend. Like space itself was remembering something long forgotten. At the same time, people across the world began to feel warmth in their hands, like holding a cup of tea. Phones buzzed with no signal. Radios hummed the same 4 notes. Birds flew in circles, and the moss in Iceland began to bloom, tiny yellow flowers pushing up through the rock without soil. The earth was not reacting. It was remembering, and now the memory became clear. The 12 rings, the seed, the towers, the mist, the spiral, all were not warnings. They were markers, left behind, not for defense, not for war, but for return. Not a return from space, a return to space. Because long ago, before oceans moved, before continents drifted, before even the first fish swam through the seas, someone had been here. They had shaped the planet gently, then stepped away. Not because they failed, not because they died, but because they chose to go. And now, the path had opened again. The doorway waited. The child took one more step. She stood inside the light now, half here, half beyond. Her coat glowed. Her hair lifted slightly as if floating in water. She turned her head, not to say goodbye, but to see if anyone else wanted to come. She raised one hand, not waving, just holding it out. And one by one, others stepped forward. Not many, just a few. A man with gray hair and no shoes. A woman holding a book. A boy in a wheelchair. A blind singer from South Korea. an old miner from Peru. None were famous, none were trained. They just felt it. They walked slowly toward the light, and the doorway did not change. It didn't flicker. It didn't close. It made space for them. As each person stepped into the light, the doorway grew brighter, but never harsh. Their bodies didn't vanish. They didn't float. They just walked forward, and the light wrapped around them like a soft blanket. And then, when 12 had passed through, the doorway stopped growing, not closed, just paused. The child turned again and looked at the earth. She whispered something no one could hear, and then the shimmer in the sky pulsed once more. The object beyond it finally moved, not fast, not loud, but clearly. It bent forward slightly like a nod, a bow, a thank you, and with that, the light around Earth pulsed brighter than ever before. Not blinding, not hot, just full, as if the planet itself smiled. Then the shimmer faded. The object vanished. The doorway stayed open, and the Earth, for the first time in millions of years, was part of something larger again. The doorway of light stayed open. It stood in the middle of the green field, like it had always been there. Around it, the air was quiet and warm. The grass moved gently in circles, like ripples on a pond. The sky above was a soft blue, with just a few clouds drifting by, slow and peaceful. In the distance, birds flew in small flocks, their wings catching the sunlight. Nothing felt rushed. Nothing felt strange. Everything just felt right. The 12 people who had walked through were gone now. Not missing, not lost. Just elsewhere. Not a single camera could follow them, not even the newest satellites. The doorway wasn't on any map, but everyone knew it was there. Across the world, people whispered about it, not in fear, but in awe, like when you see the ocean for the first time, or hear a song that makes your heart feel bigger. It wasn't just news anymore. It was part of the world, like mountains, like wind, like memory. At the 12 old ring sites, the mist had all faded. The spirals had vanished. The ground was smooth again, but warmer to the touch. The moss glowed just slightly at night, like stars had landed there to sleep. Scientists took readings. Nothing harmful, nothing loud, but something had changed in the soil. Plants were growing faster. Animals lingered longer. The air felt richer, like something once missing had returned. In Antarctica, the dome stayed open. The chair no longer floated. The blue light had gone, but the air inside the chamber felt softer, like it had been cleaned by time itself. The walls were smooth now, all the strange symbols faded away. A few scientists remained, but they didn't take notes anymore. They just sat nearby, as if waiting for something they couldn't describe, or maybe listening. Above Earth, the shimmer was gone. The strange object that had waited just beyond the stars had vanished, but the stars themselves now looked just a little brighter. Not in photos, not in telescopes, but to the naked eye, as if the sky had been gently polished, or perhaps the eyes of the world had finally learned how to see more clearly. People everywhere were different, though no one could say exactly how. Children dreamed of stars they'd never studied. Painters began using colors that didn't have names. Songs rose up in small towns that sounded ancient and new at the same time. A woman in Japan began drawing spirals into the sand without knowing why. A boy in Canada built a model of the doorway using only sticks and string and said, "They'll come back." Not with sadness, but with joy. Some people felt scared, not of what had happened, but of what might come next. But fear didn't spread. It melted, like frost under morning sun, because deep down, almost everyone agreed on one thing. This was not the end. It was not even the beginning. It was something in between. A bridge, a spark, a second chance at a first hello. The seed in Iceland was now cold, the pedestal empty. But if you stood there in silence, you could still hear a faint tone in the wind. 4 notes, rising, then falling. The same sound, the earth had whispered just before the doorway opened. Not a song, not a warning, just a message left behind, gently folded into the land. Return. That one word stayed in the minds of people everywhere. It showed up in poems, in the space between words, in dreams that felt too old to belong to the dreamer. It didn't mean to go back. It didn't mean to undo. It meant to come home, even if you didn't know where home was. And slowly, without plans or leaders or rules, people began to gather, not at the doorway, but near each of the 12 ring sites. They brought flowers, stones, small carved symbols. Some sat in silence. Some sang songs. Some simply looked at the sky and waited, not for a miracle, but for the feeling that had stirred the earth like wind over still water. In one place, a young girl drew spirals in chalk on the street. She didn't know why. She said it made her feel less alone. In another, a group of old men planted a tree inside the ring. They said it felt right. The tree grew faster than normal. Its leaves shimmered silver in the moonlight. And in cities, people stopped arguing so much about where we came from, or who was right. They started asking different questions, better questions, like, what do we want to become? What story are we a part of? And if someone was watching, what would they see in us? For the first time in a long time, people didn't feel alone on their planet, not because someone was watching from space, but because someone had been here before, had built the towers, had left the rings, had drawn the spirals in moss and soil and sky. Not to warn us, not to test us, but to remind us that someone had come before, and one day, someone would come again, maybe not to take us, maybe not even to speak, but just to walk beside us, because Earth was never only ours. It was always part of something bigger, something older, something that now waited in silence, like a promise folded into the stars. The doorway remained open, but no one else stepped through, not because they were afraid, but because they understood. This time, the path would wait for us to be ready. And until then, the earth would dream. And in that dream, the stars would whisper, and the ground would remember. And every child born under this sky would carry that memory with them, quietly, gently, like a seed, waiting for the day we would not ask, are we alone? But instead ask, where do we go next?